Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 39 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're learning how to think like an engineer using the Arduino Uno R4 Wi-Fi. What I will need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Sunfounder. Sunfounder is actually sponsoring this most excellent series of video lessons. And in this class, we will be using the Sunfounder Elite Explorer Kit. Now, hopefully most of you guys already have your gear, but if you don't, take a look down in the description. There is a link over to Amazon, and you can hop on over there and pick your kit up. And believe me, your life and my life are going to be a whole lot easier if we are working on identical hardware. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and talk about what I am going to teach you today. And what I'm going to teach you is a little bit more of an upper level programming skill that will allow you to write more complicated programs that are easier to read, easier to debug, and easier to interact with. And what I'm going to show you is how you can take a complicated program and you can break it down into manageable little chunks that we call functions. So rather than having a void loop with this great big huge list of instructions, we're going to take a task and we're going to break it into manageable chunks, and then we're going to write functions for those manageable chunks. And then in our main program, we're just going to be calling the function, calling the function, calling the function, and then everything just becomes much better. Now, we haven't done this so far because usually our programs were pretty simple. We would do something like read a sensor and write an LED, like read something, write something, read something, write something. So it was a very simple program, and we really didn't need to break it up into these modules. But the time has come for us to up our software skills a little bit. Now, we got ready for it last week by learning more about variables, where we learned about local variables and we learned about global variables. What I'm going to show you today to introduce you to the concept of functions, I'm going to teach it to you initially today using global variables because that's the easiest way to think about it. And then next way, we'll really do it the more elegant way using local variables. Okay, does that sound good? I hope it does. Let me get out of your way here. Let's see, I'll move over here. And then the first thing I think I'm going to need you to do is come over here to the most excellent www.toptechboy.com. And then I need you to use this happy little search bar here, and I need you to search on something like Arduino program to average and sort grades, and you should come to this most excellent lesson here. And then what I'll need you to do is point at the two little page icons, the little page icon. Click on that, and then you've copied that code. And what this code does is, this is the code that we developed 2 weeks ago for writing a kind of complicated Arduino program that would read a list of grades from the user, would sort the grades, would average the grades, would find the high grade, find the low grade, and then print things out. And that's kind of what we did, and we just made it one great big huge program. But now I'm going to take that program and I'll show you how to do it better using functions. We're going to close that. Now we're going to come over here and open up a fresh new Arduino IDE sketch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste that code that we just copied. I'm going to paste it here. And let's see, that's a pretty long program. It looks like it's about 76 lines of code. And it's still going to be just as long, but it's going to be organized better when we use functions. Sound good? I hope it does. Well, let's go ahead and run this just to make sure that we can copy and paste and that the universe is in proper working order. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to run this. And it looks pretty good down here. Looks pretty happy compiling. Now it is downloading the sketch into the Arduino. And then we will close this. We will open the serial monitor. We'll come over here and press the button. And then, got a mismatch on my baud rate here that we can fix easy enough. I guess let's go ahead and make this 115/200. And now that matches this. And it can be whatever you want as long as those two things match. 115/200 would work better. Okay, now let's try to run it again. We're pretty sure it's going to compile because it compiled last time. It is downloading and it is done. We're going to close this and then we will come over here and we will mash the magic button. How many grades? Well, let's say that I have 4 grades, and those grades are, the first grade is 90, 92, 94, and 96. And then we click enter. And then what do we get? Look at this. My grades are 96, 94, 92, 90. It sorted them and put them into descending order. And then it tells me my average is 93. That's right, for the numbers I entered. High grade was 96 and low grade was 90. And so our program is running. But let's take a look at this program. You can see that we declared all of our variables up here at the very top outside of the void setup and outside of the void loop. So based on last week's lesson, these variables are what? They are global variables. So every part of the program will be aware of these variables. And so I'm going to teach you, first round, I'm going to teach you about functions using global variables. Then next week, I'll teach you about doing functions with local variables, which is really the right way to do it. But I don't want to make it too complicated all at once. We're going to break it down into 2. Now, what do we do here? Let's look at this void loop. So we declare all of our variables. We turn on our serial monitor in the void setup. Then in the void loop, we're asking, how many grades do you want? And then you ask, you wait, then you read in the number of grades, and then you go in and you ask the user for each one of those grades. And then at the end of all of this, what you have is you have an array called grades, and that array has the list of grades that the user input. Sound pretty good? Okay, but if we look at this program, there's that, and then here's a flag, and what's this flag business? And then we're printing the grades, and then it's a bucket, and there's all this stuff. You see, the code gets really, really complicated, so we want to break it up into manageable chunks. Well, if I come up here, let's look at this very top part. I'm asking the user for the number of grades, and then I step through a for loop asking him for each individual grade, and then I put that into the array's grades of I. What would you call that? Like, what would be a good thing to call that program? Like, if you're just thinking about it, what would be a good thing for us to call that? Okay, what do you think? What would be a good thing to call that? I think that I am going to call that input grades. Okay, so I'm going to take all of this code that is associated with inputting grades. I start by asking how many, entering how many, and then entering them all. And then that little curly bracket right there, that finishes that for loop. So this is all very good, and I'm actually going to cut it. Okay, I'm going to cut it. And then I'm going to come down here after the void loop. You see this little curly here, that closes the void loop. And I am going to create a new function. It's not going to be void setup. It is not going to be void loop. It is going to be void and then input grades, like that. Void input grades, open, close, and then I'm going to open a curly and close a curly. So this is my function. My function is called void input grades. Now, input grades is the name. That was terrible. Input grades is the name of the function, and what void means is that this function doesn't return any values up to the calling function. Now, why is it not returning any values? Because I am using global variables. So if I change grades down here, the change is reflected throughout the whole program because I am using the global variable grades. So I don't need to return a value because whatever I do here will be seen by the whole program. Now, if I wanted to return a float, which we'll do next week, instead of calling this void input grades, I'd call it float input grades. If I was going to return an int, instead of calling it void input grades, I would call it int input grades. And so I could return an int, I could return a float, but in this case, I'm returning nothing, so it is void. Okay, what do I want to do here? I want to do exactly what I had done above. So I'm going to paste all of that code. I'm going to paste all of that code like this. And so here, let's make sure that I do this right. I've got the open of the function, and then down here, I've got the close of the function. And let me do a Control T just to make sure. Yeah, so you see those line up right. So that looks good. So now this is a function that I can call. So how would I call it? I would come up here where I was, right here, and then I would just call the function input grades like that. Open, close, and semicolon. So what happens when the program sees this function call input grades? It's going to jump down here to input grades, and it's going to do all of this code here. But now when we look at the main program, we just see one command, input grades. To the casual observer, what are they going to conclude that you're doing here? Inputting grades. Now, if they're interested in getting down into the nuts and bolts, they could come in and they could look more carefully here. All right. Now, you notice one thing here is we are not passing any parameters in here, and we are not receiving any parameters here. Why? Because we're using global variables. Now, if we were using local variables, we would need to pass them in inside of those parentheses and then return them back. That will be the topic of next week. But for right now, we've got this. Let's go ahead and run this. I actually think this should run right here like what we've just done. Okay, it's actually looking kind of good, isn't it? All right, so it says done. How many grades? Let's do 4 again, and let's do 90, 91, 92, 93, like that. Okay, and then 94. And whoa, that is terrible. Okay, that is terrible. What did we do wrong? We didn't empty our bucket here, did we? I thought I'd done that, but maybe I hadn't corrected that on this. So let's come in and let's look at this. Bucket is equal to 0 for I is equal to 0. That actually looks really, really right, doesn't it? We come down here and we input the grades. Maybe I put the number in wrong. Yeah, I put a number in wrong. Let's try it again. I think I just put the number in wrong. So let's try 4, and then let's say 90, 91, 92, 93. Okay, and boom. The average is 91.5, the high is 93, the low is 90, and we have 93, 92, 91, 90 in order. So, okay, that one really scared me because I was really sure that program was running and I couldn't figure out why it looked like I hadn't emptied my bucket, but all is well, I just entered the data wrong. Okay, so now we come up here and this is way, way, way simpler. What do? We just input grades. Now, this was the other way that we did the sort, all these commented out things, so I'm just going to take that out. So now I input grades. What would be the next thing that would be good to do? I could average the grades. Okay, I could average the grades. All right, Now, if I'm going to average the grades, I've got to create the function down here. So what will I do? I will create a void average grades like that. Don't pass it any parameters. Open curly, close curly. Now, everything associated with averaging the grades needs to come right here. So if I come up here, this is my averaging grades. I start by setting the bucket to 0, then I add all the numbers up, and then I calculate the average by dividing bucket by num grade. So I'm going to take all of that, I'm going to cut it, and then I'm going to come down here, and inside of average grades, I'm going to paste it. And then when we come up here, I still have this. This is going to be when I print things out. I don't want to print it out in the average function, but we'll have to make note that this has to go in the proper place in a minute. Okay. And so does this, where we are printing this stuff out. Okay. But that's for a little bit later. So what's the first thing I did? I input the grades, got the function down below. What's the next thing I do? I average the grades, got that down below. What's the next thing I need to do? Sort the grades. Sort the silly grades like that. So what do? I come down here, and what I'm going to do is say void and then sort grades like that. Open, close, not passing any parameters. Open curly, close curly. And now what do I need to get? All of this nonsense up here associated with sorting the grades, right? So this is setting the flag 1, and this was the way we sorted it all the way down to here. That is all it. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to cut that, and now I'm going to come down here to sort grades. I'm going to post all that in, paste all that in. I'm going to do a Control-T to keep things lined up. So now let's look at my main program. Void setup, just setting up the serial monitor. I input the grades, I average the grades, I sort the grades. Then what do I want to do? I want to find high, low. So I'm going to say find high grade and low grade. I'm going to call that find high, low, like that. And then I'm going to find that thing where I do all that. And this is all of that. So I set the high grade, I set the low grade, and then I look for the high grade and low grade, and it comes all the way down to that curly. I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut that out. Man, I've got some. No, that's okay. That's okay. So now what was that called? That was, let me make sure I say it right. That was find high, low. So I'm going to come down here with a what? A void find high, low, like that. Now open curly, close curly, and then right here I'm going to paste all that code like that. Okay. Now if we come up and look at our void loop, what do? We input the grades, we average the grades, we sort the grades, we find high, low. All of that is very good. And now what do we want to do? Print result to like that. Print result to like that. Okay, there. Now what will print results do? That will be all this other things. We print a blank line, we list what the grades are, we list the average, we list all of that stuff. So I think if we come down to here, that curly there is one that closes our void loop. So I don't want to get that. So I'm going to come here, and now I'm going to cut all that out. Okay, and then that's going to come down here, and I am going to now have a void print results like that. Open close curly, come here, and all that printing nonsense I'm going to put in here. So what does that do? It's going to print a blank line, and then it's going to say your grades are, it's going to print the grades. They're going to be in sorted order because we've already sorted them before we came down here. Then we're going to print the average, the high grade, the low grade, and then we are going to print a blank line. So let's see what happens. If it doesn't run, it's probably because I missed one of those open close curly business things, but it looks like it's actually going to run. It's downloading. Okay, and it actually looks like it works. So now let's see if it works. So I'm going to press the magic button. It says how many grades. I'm going to say 5 grades. Okay. I'm going to say I have a 90, and I have 100, and then I have a 92, and then I have a 98, and then I have a 95, and then let's see what happens. Boom. It comes in. My grades are 198, 95, 92, 90, sorted. I have your average is 95, your high grade is 100, and your low grade is 90. Boom. Look at that. Now, I want you to look at how much more readable this program is. I come down, void setup doesn't do anything except turn on the serial monitor. Now, if you just came in off the street and looked and said, what does this guy's code do? It says, well, it looks like in the void loop, he is going to, let me get rid of all this excess white space, this ridiculously unneeded white space, okay? What does it look like he's doing? It looks like he's inputting the grades, he's averaging the grades, he's sorting the grades, he's finding high, low, and he is printing the results. So all of a sudden, at a very high level, I can kind of really understand what this program does. It's very, very clear and very, very logical what the program is doing. The code is very readable because I've broken a big job up into little manageable chunks. Okay, now, I wonder how he sorted those grades. Okay, did he do a bubble sort, or did he do this or that? So I want to look into exactly how he sorted the grades. Well, I could come down here and I could find sort grades. Oh, look at that. He's setting a flag, and then the flag changes if something swaps. So he's gonna sort until nothing's swapped, and then see, oh yeah, I remember how to do that. I see how he's doing the sort. But you see, now it's very, very logically organized and easy to read and easy to debug. Okay, so this is sort of like your introduction to Arduino functions. Now, what is good about it? I've taken a complicated job and I've broken it down into small, manageable chunks. And it was pretty easy to do because everybody shared all the variables, because all the variables were global. Every function was aware of and could alter all of the variables, and that is the easiest way to do it, but it's not the best way to do it, because when you get into more complicated programs, you don't want this guy messing with this guy's variables. You want the variables to be local to the function that they're working with, and then you want to pass the variables in and out between the different functions. Now, another thing I should say about functions, functions can call functions, you know, ad nauseum. You can nest these things. So like, let's say what I could do here is maybe I could create a new, you know, like where I say find average, I could put in there, I could have that call some other function, and then that could call some other function. So you can nest these things, and it works very obviously and intuitively, but that does work. Okay, so what am I going to do? Your homework for this week is just to play around with this, post a video showing you that you have it working, that you've defined functions, and then next week what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to look at examples that are more the way we really want to do it. You now understand the functions as being chunks, but then next week what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to do some programs using local variables and more perfectly understand what really the right way to do this sort of problem is. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, guys, I hope you are enjoying taking these classes as much as I am making them. As always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is the Patreon supporters that keep this channel up and keep this channel running. I want to thank you for keeping me in the game. I love doing this, but I do need support if I'm going to continue. Okay, you can also help me if you give me a thumbs up. Also, leave a comment down below. And then if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. When you do, make sure you ring the bell so you'll get notification when future lessons drop. And as always, most importantly, share this video with other people, because the world needs more people thinking like an engineer and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.